السلام عليكم وأهلا بكم.
Greetings to you again to this third session of the 17th Al-Jazeera Forum. We welcome our guests. So nowadays, anyone who wants to do anything will do it without accountability. So did the international legal system collapse, or there are still remnants of it? And what is that remnant? So is there any role now for any international institution, whether it is the ICC or the International Court of Justice or an international judicial system? Do the victims have any chance, or their rights have been lost forever? Those challenges are imposed by the fluctuations witnessed nowadays in the world, and we all know that we are living in a pivotal time right now, at a time which could form the world for tens of years. We welcome our guests in this session. Fatou Bensouda, former prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. And we welcome Professor Ilyas Bantikas, Professor of International Law at Hamad bin Khalifa University, and Dr. Tariq Shindab, Lebanese lawyer and researcher specializing in international law, and Francesca Albanese, an Italian international lawyer and academic researcher. Before starting with listening to the panelists, we will start with some remarks for Ms. Francesca Albanese, who is an Italian lawyer and academic researcher, and then we will come back to the panelists. نحن قضينا عامين ماضيين ننظر
planning and making of a genocide. And the genocide is not over. The genocide as the intentional destruction of a group as such is clearly unveiled now. It's been in the air for a long time, and now it's in full display. It's been difficult to report the genocide. Al Jazeera knows better than anyone else in the media realm, because of all the losses it has suffered as a media company. But no other people knows it better than the Palestinians themselves. The Palestinians have continued to narrate the deluge of conscience that fell upon them relentlessly. And this is a challenge. The fact that instead of stopping Israel, most of the world has armed, giving it political excuses, political sheltering, economic and financial support. This is a challenge. The fact that most of the media in the Western world has been amplifying the pro-apartheid, the genocidal narrative is a challenge. And at the same time, here also lays the opportunity. Because if international law has been stabbed in the heart, it's also true that never before the global community has seen the challenges that we all face. We who do not control large amounts of financial capitals, algorithms, and weapons. We now see that we, as a humanity, have a common enemy, and freedoms, the respect of fundamental freedoms, is the last peaceful avenue, the last peaceful toolbox that we have to regain our freedom. But we need to stand up. we need to do the right thing, all of us, in our individual sphere, being as lawyers, journalists, educators, students, ordinary citizens at home. We all have a role to play. And this role is changing our habits from what we choose to buy, to consume, to read, to how we stand in front of power. We need to be able to speak up. We need to have the strength to look at each other and see our brothers and sisters and see allies in them. And in this respect, I think that Al Jazeera has a bigger challenge than others, because it is to stay true to its core values, true to the mission that has made it known around the world, its ability to produce true facts and march toward justice with them in the hands. I do believe that Palestine will be free. I do believe that we will all be free, because too much human rights conscience is rooted in today's world after 80 years of preaching and teaching human rights. But we need to act, and the time is now. So for a 26 of full commitment toward accountability and justice.
إذن شكرا للسيدة فرانشيسكا البنيز.
Thank you, Francesca Albanese, for this brief session. And here we are speaking about the Palestinian cause in a world moving towards multipolarity. Now we go back to Fatou, Minnesota. She was a prosecutor when this has been related to the issue of Palestine, and this is a great issue, as the current prosecutor, Karim Khan, was subject to many pressures that have led at the end to stop him from working and to threaten him personally, according to some credible media reports from the former foreign minister of the UK, David Cameron. But those who do that usually are subject to many pressures in their personal life and during their job. But she, Bensouda, accepted this responsibility, which has opened the path for Palestinians to resort to this outlet. Please, you have the floor. Go ahead. Shukran.
Colleagues, panelists, and advocates for justice. Today, as we gather at this 17th Al Jazeera Forum, we confront a truth that can no longer be ignored, and that is the overwhelming suffering and devastation endured by the people of Palestine, as well as Israeli victims. And this demands our unwavering attention and urgent action. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has left behind shattered families, destroyed communities, and wounds that cut deep into the collective heart of humanity. Each life lost, each right denied, and each dream extinguished is a call for accountability and the restoration of dignity under the rule of law. International law was not crafted as a distant ideal, but as a living promise, a shield for the defenseless, a voice for the voiceless, and a barrier against the repetition of history's darkest chapters. After the Holocaust, the world united to declare never again. Yet, we must admit with humility and sorrow that time and again, that promise has been broken. Both Israeli victims of this October 7th attack and the Palestinians enduring unspeakable hardship deserve justice. Ongoing destruction in Gaza and the West Bank highlights widespread suffering, while inconsistent international responses weaken hopes for fairness and shared humanity. Indeed, especially in the collective West, too often they turn away or apply double standards. This selective approach not only undermines the victims' hopes for justice, but also it erodes the foundations of our shared humanity. And the greatest dishonor to their memory, is not only the failure to prevent new atrocities, but also the perpetuation of double standards and selective justice. And to genuinely honor their suffering is to ensure that justice is not applied selectively, but as a steadfast shield for all of humanity. And in betraying this trust, we betray not only the victims of the past, but also the future hope of the world, of a world that is governed by true justice and universal human rights. And the rule of law must be universal, it must be relentless, and it must be impartial. When we allow exceptions, when we let politics silence justice or tolerate impunity for grave violations, we risk not only failing victims of atrocities, but we also betraying the conscience of the world. The unequal application of international law endangers all of us. For if one people can be left unprotected, then none of us are truly safe. So, and this is why the work of international courts and legal mechanisms is so critical. They must stand strong and be independent and be courageous, free from the sway of politics and driven by a steadfast commitment to truth and integrity. Mechanisms like the International Criminal Court and the principle of universal jurisdiction are not mere technicalities. They are lifelines of justice. Their strength or their failure carries consequences that reach far beyond any single conflict. So let us be clear. Palestine is in many ways the litmus test for international law and justice in the 21st century. If humanity succeeds here, if we break the pattern of impunity and uphold the dignity of every individual, regardless of nationality or power, it will have honored the spirit of never again. But if we fail, we risk ushering in an era where justice is nothing more than an empty word. But I urge you to hold on to hope. Let us renew our collective commitment to justice. Let us cultivate unwavering respect for international law and break the cycle of silence and inaction. The future we seek, a future of peace and accountability, depends on what we do now. And the suffering of victims without distinction must serve as a unifying spark that reignites our conscience and sets a new standard for justice, not just for one people, but for all of humanity.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fatou Bensouda, the former Prosecutor General of the International Criminal Court. And thank you for ending your intervention by asking us to hang on to hope, because we all fear that we fall into the trap of losing all hope. It's nice to restore this hope. And we will see throughout this panel and through the contributions of our panelists that a lot can be there which can generate hope. Now we have Mr. Saeed bin Arabiya from the International Committee for Law. I think we were asked to talk about the challenges facing accountability for what happened in Gaza. It is, according to international law, are crimes against humanity and also can amount to genocide. Why do we have this challenge? These challenges are linked to the organizations responsible for that. Ms. Fatou Bensouda, because of her role in the case of Palestine, faced a lot of pressures. Now the International Criminal Court itself is faced with a lot of pressures, and this can impact its work and its ability to deliver justice. The judges themselves are suffering the same pressures, and because of their role in the indictment against Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, the three prosecutors of the ICC are subject to these pressures. Many of the judges who belong to different countries and nationalities out of the 18 members are suffering pressures. They are suffering pressures on their daily life, their work, like Microsoft, when there is sanctions imposed by America, it will stop all the electronic services and things for these people. So the essential role this court plays in accountability and fighting impunity is itself being subjected to these pressures, and also the civil society organizations who worked for Palestinian organizations, our colleagues in Al-Haq, Al-Damir, and other organizations who played a role in collecting evidence, and they are being pressurized simply because they did their work in evidence gathering and in dealing with the justice system to achieve justice and accountability. Also, Ms. Albanese, also she is suffering from these sanctions. What is important to emphasize here is not the importance of impunity, which is organized and entire countries are taking part in that. We also witness a war being waged on the International Criminal Court and the civil society organizations. And apart from the ICC itself, the countries which ratified this principle, they are willingly and voluntarily accepted to have a universal jurisdiction when it comes to crimes relating to torture and genocide and crimes against humanity. This means these people, the officials of these people, the authorities, are responsible for either trying the perpetrators or handing them over to other jurisdictions. Unfortunately, what we see is these countries have not directed their prosecuting authorities to act, and on the contrary, they are targeting the individuals or the organizations who are defending the rights of the victims. And because of the role the civil society organizations play, many of the dossiers have been presented to countries with universal jurisdiction. In France, for example, and this is the first time we see an arrest warrant are being issued against two individuals with dual French and Israeli nationality, and because Israel was hindering the access of aid into Gaza. For this reason, an approach was made, a petition to the French prosecutor general, and the charges were leveled to these two individuals to incite genocide, to take part in genocide and other crimes against humanity and war crimes. And it's important to emphasize that while we're speaking now, there are procedures being taken which describe the crimes committed in Gaza are contributions to genocide or inciting genocide. This kind of universal jurisdiction is being used in other countries like Britain against people who took part in the Israeli military service, and it's important to emphasize how important it is to support the individuals who are active in this regard. And it's important to mention also that the judiciary system, and we noticed that in 2024 there was an opinion by the International Court of Justice that the Israeli presence in Palestinian territories is contrary to international law, it's legal, and anything Israel does will be contrary to international law. And until now, the countries which are supposed to be implementing this advisory opinion by the National Court of Justice have not fulfilled their responsibilities, and the opinion was not implemented, and these countries until now have not activated this opinion from a legal point of view. Also, the United Nations itself is subjected to pressures regarding funding and financial pressure on the UN agencies like the High Commission for Human Rights and others, and because of this financial pressure, they are finding themselves forced to fire employees. These challenges we mentioned, but it's important that when we speak here from Doha, we know that there are judges who believe in the justice of this case and are trying to seek justice, and it's important, like Mrs. Bensouda said, we should not lose hope to have accountability and to restore the rights of the victims. Thank you, Mr. Said. This international system, which was which we see today, was formed after World War II, but under different political circumstances. Dr. Ilyas Pentecost will tell us how we got to this system. Is this system working, or has it stopped working because the conditions for its establishment are not there?
Cut to the chase, because I like the chase. So there are two ways of that powerful countries have in the past been able to argue against the current standing of international law. One was through the language of exceptionalism, that the law stands as it is, but that exceptionally on this particular occasion, they have the right to do something else, which only they have the right, but nobody else has. I mean, an example is humanitarian intervention, that generally you're not allowed to violate the territory of another country, but exceptionally to save some people, you can do so. But no other country can do the same. Exceptionalism. The second one is by blurring the lines of legality. If you make something complex, fuzzy, no one really understands where it starts and where it ends, then you can do anything in the middle and project your own narrative. By way of illustration, in Gaza, international law is very clear that the occupying power has absolute responsibility for whatever happens within the territory. That is also protecting every and each right of the people living therein. However, Israel in 2005 adopted its so-called disengagement plan from Gaza, which meant that it no longer had any soldiers on the ground within the territory. So by doing that, it wanted to divest from its responsibility to take care of the rights of people living in Gaza. And so this meant that people in Gaza, therefore, had a different status, that Israel was no longer responsible for them. Again, a different narrative from what international law tries to project by saying, because we're not on the ground, therefore there's no responsibility for the people there. In my own country, Greece, saddled with a huge debt on the basis, allegedly, that Greece was owing everyone money. And in reality, that wasn't the case. In reality, there was a huge private debt, which the state was forced to assume as a public debt, which therefore befell on the people of Greece as a public debt. Yeah. False narratives. And so that's the history of international law. It's a story of contested false narratives. And as Zain was mentioning, if we look at 1945, we find it as a simple kind of way of justice, that people were tried at Nuremberg, and that this was natural at the time. This wasn't natural at the time. Before 1945, if anyone committed a war crime anywhere, it was the state that was responsible, but not the people. The people were liable only under their own domestic laws. And of course, if you move that model to Nuremberg, if people were liable under their own domestic laws, then every German would have had to go free, because under German law, you're allowed to do all these things. And so there had to be a break from the past, and that break was Nuremberg. And if we move 75 years later, we see that we are faced again with another crossroads. And the crossroads is that the law is there. There is individual criminal responsibility. People are liable for what they do, but the law is not enforceable. And so the fuzziness again here is that the fuzziness, which is projected by the United States and Israel in this case, is that we should move international law the boundaries, move it below, not apply it as it is. Whereas the reality is that there is absolutely zero incentive for anyone to move those boundaries. International law is sufficient as it is. We need move nothing. What we need to do is to enforce the law and take away the false narrative. And how do we do that? Through organizations like Al Jazeera, that provides a truth behind those false narratives. And I think there is hope. And the hope is that advocacy plays a huge role. If people are alone believing that there's no hope, then there is no hope. But if each individual hopes becomes a collective hope, then people realize that they can stand. And we've seen Trump go back on Greenland from the very simple thing of having 20 monitors from different countries in the European Union staying on the island. And I think there's hope when we see all those things happening. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا لك بروفيسور إلياس بنتيكاسوس.
Very much, Professor Elias Bentikatos from Hamad bin Khalifa University. And now the final intervention before we open the floor for questions from the floor and through our audience from our different platforms. It's Dr. Tariq Shandab now. Thank you very much to our panelists and to the ladies and gentlemen in the presence. I listened to Her Excellency, the former Prosecutor General, and how Palestine is a testing case for international law, and how Mr. Saeed talking about the pressures and challenges, and Dr. Elias also, although I disagree with Dr. Elias in the case of Greece, that Greece was declared bankrupt. In Lebanon, we put our money in banks, but the state robbed our assets and our money. So it's slightly different. When we hear to Mr. Elias, Mr. Saeed, and the Prosecutor General, we get the impression that the Rome Statute and the international law provides hope for all the victims. This system was established in the 1990s, and since that date, thousands of Palestinians fell victim, and the court did not do anything. The court didn't do anything either in Syria, even when million martyrs fell. It hasn't done anything in Sudan yet, and all these places which crimes against humanity and genocide have taken place. It's true, there are most of the ICC's work in the past was in Africa. So therefore there is selectivity in dealing with cases. And the problem doesn't lie in this selectiveness. There are other problems, that there are countries which refuse to sign the Rome Statute, and you cannot force them to. Suppose that these countries commit crimes of genocide or crimes against humanity. Palestine is a state which signed the Rome Statute in 2015, but it took them 2 years to get their case, and because Israel's refusal. And also within the Rome Statute and the ICC's universal jurisdiction to deal with the most serious crimes against humanity and war crimes and genocide, all of them are committed in Palestine, but Israel is not signatory to that, and the Security Council has the authority to refer the case to the court, but the very makeup of the Security Council and the United States is an ally of Israel, so this will make it impossible for America to accept it, trying Netanyahu if there is no jurisdiction. The Security Council is an international political tool to achieve peace and stability in the world. So how can a political tool interfere in what is an independent judiciary authority? So in any country in the world, if the justice system is not independent from the political system, there cannot be justice. And now the Security Council can take a decision to stop the investigation in Palestine, and this is a basic problem. So the problem is not to do with the ICC as a system, but the entire international justice system. When the UN was established and the veto right, many people do not understand that the ICC is not a branch of the United Nations. Even the pressures applied by America regarding funding or pressures on the Security Council or not granting entry visas to countries are subject to discussion. So we have to seriously think of alternatives, and like the principle of universal jurisdiction, like in France and Germany. And although the ICC has issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his defense minister, the ICC has no legal arm of enforcement. So nobody can force Israel to comply. This is a subject which should be raised with the leaders of countries. We cannot allow 5 countries to manipulate the fate of victims and the fate of countries. Thank you very much, Dr. Tariq. This is the source of pain that we all suffer from. We all know that the international system is defective, but if it collapses or destroyed, maybe the alternative will be even more defective. Ms. Fatou Bensouda, I'll give her the right to respond to what Mr. Tariq has said. She'll find herself as a former prosecutor general or the current prosecutor general. She will find herself either with the dissatisfaction of the victims because no results are being achieved, and the disgruntlement of the people who oppose it because nothing is being done. That's why she is being subjected to sanctions. Ms. Albanese and others have been subjected to that, and this is a position where nobody can be satisfied. Please, you can respond to that.
Very pleased with the last. I wanted to intervene again, but I'm glad you ended up with talking about the limitations of the ICC and the way that the ICC has been built or established. It has its limitations, and it is not in every situation that the ICC can intervene. Just to clarify briefly about that, the ICC cannot intervene in a country which has not ratified the Rome Statute and become part of the ICC. That is why, we received criticisms during my time that you are not in Yemen, you are not in Syria. But I just want to remind that both Yemen and Syria are not part of the ICC. Therefore, the ICC could not intervene in these cases. In the case of Palestine, I think that, as you said, ICC did nothing, but I think I'm proud to say that ICC actually did something under my tenure, because I was the prosecutor to open a case in the Palestinian situation, and I received sanctions from Donald Trump for that, for opening that, the Palestinian situation, which is existing until today. So the ICC did something. Initially, of course, we were not in a position to do anything because at the time also, Palestine was not part of the ICC. As I explained before, it was not part of the ICC. And even though it made a declaration and accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC, it further also ratified the Rome Statute, which made it easier for me to be able to step in and open the case in Palestine. So I believe that in that particular case, the ICC was able to do something. With respect to Sudan, you will also recall that Sudan is not a state party to the Rome Statute. However, under the Rome Statute, the Security Council can refer situations to the ICC, whether you are a state party or not. So this is what the Security Council did in the case of Sudan and in the case of Libya. And this is why ICC was able to step in and investigate and prosecute in Sudan. And I can say that today, perhaps during my time, maybe that has changed, but Sudan was one of the countries or situations that we issued more arrest warrants than any other situation to show that investigations were going on. But what happened again was that, and I have experienced this, and prosecutors will always experience this, there will always be pushback when you try to scrutinize anybody. And in many cases, whether it is the militia who will come against the ICC or perhaps the state itself, the state will use its apparatus to attack the ICC. In the case of Sudan, it even went all the way to the African Union, attacking the ICC, refusing to cooperate with the ICC, refusing to arrest, refusing to do anything that concerned the case of Sudan. And unfortunately, look at what we are having again today. I used to say several times that the lack of justice will only cause a repetition of what has happened. Accountability, we must have accountability for things to change. So it is very important for us also to understand the ICC, the jurisdiction of the ICC, where it can intervene, where it cannot intervene, why it can intervene, because its crimes have been committed, why it cannot. For instance, people used to say, oh, there is corruption, ICC should come in, which is not the jurisdiction of the ICC. Without taking time, I'll just leave it at that. Maybe there will be more questions. But I think that one has to understand that ICC is operating under a lot of challenges, including its budget, including lack of cooperation, including attack on its mandate, including refusal to arrest, and many other challenges that the court is facing. And as you rightly said, the court was established without powers of arrest. Like, we don't have police that would go out and arrest people and bring them before the ICC. And I compared it to the national jurisdiction. I was a prosecutor in my own country of the Gambia, I would sit and make a phone call and say, arrest such an individual, collect such an individual. But at the ICC, you cannot do that. You have to depend on states where the person is and seek for cooperation for arrest. So all of these things, I think, needs to be explained for many to understand the limitations of the court.
ومع ذلك
Despite that, nobody has imagined that the ICC would issue a warrant for arrest against the Prime Minister of Israel, a current one, and his defense minister when he was in office. So there are things that really happened, even though the arrest, as was clarified by Ms. Bensouda, is relevant to states through which the perpetrators or the accused could pass through and to be handed over to the ICC. Now we open the floor for Q&A, but we have questions through the platforms, and then we open the floor for the audience. Do you think that the ICC works according independent legal standards, or the political pressures of the big and super countries will determine who will be held accountable and who will not be held accountable? How do you explain the time gap between the evidence that is available and the lack of accountability in Palestine? What are the ways to achieve and realize the goals of the ICC against war criminals such as Netanyahu? Can we speak about the authority of the law and against the Zionist entity who has committed crimes against the Palestinians? Is it possible to arrest war criminal Netanyahu and his ministers because of the ethnic cleansing and the genocide in Gaza? Do you think that the Palestinian cause has been a real test to the impunity issue in the ICC? If the big countries continue to challenge the decisions of the ICC and to reject handing over those wanted, are we going to see the jungle law become prevalent now? The audio is not clear from this person. How can there be a protection for the civilians in the Palestinian territories, and why are they prevented from achieving or receiving humanitarian aid? Is there lack of legal mechanisms, or there is no will to actually apply those? So what is ruling now? How can the international humanitarian law keep its effectiveness as a way of accountability in the Palestinian cause, while we see there is a big gap between the texts and the reality? And Mr. Omar, do you believe that new international polls would help in actually breaking the cycle of impunity? So we open the floor now for questions from the audience. We have many questions. We start off with Jivar al-Budairi, and she is one of our colleagues from the land of the battle. So she must have something to ask about. And before you say anything, Jivara, we were asking how do we protect ourselves as journalists, and what we are doing, will it change anything? Go ahead, Jivara. Thank you, Zain, and I thank the panelists. Ms. Bensouda, before the genocide war, we were in the ICC in The Hague, and that was at the same time of Shireen Abu Akleh being assassinated. a number of judges and lawyers in the court told us that the number of the issues and the cases and the documents and the testimonies present at the court are bigger than the size of the biggest building in the court. This is before the genocide war. So what is the situation now after the genocide war? Are those documents, you say, regardless of all these efforts, you say personally that there is no use for the ICC in terms of the international arena, and Israel continues what it does on the ground, not only in Gaza, but now we have another scene in the West Bank of their crimes. And last question to you. What is Trump now is putting forward as a peace plan? Is it an attempt to find an alternative to the ICC and an alternative to the UN organization in general? And a last question. You have said 3 questions now. You spoke about right and conscience and the Human Rights Center in Gaza. So we see the youth, lawyers and researchers struggle daily from violations that are undescribable while they are just collecting testimonies. They see who protects us, even the lawyer himself or herself, who brings about a documented testimony secretly as if he is doing a commando work, and he is yet just doing a work of taking evidence to the ICC. So why there isn't protection to all those staff who work seriously on the ground? Thank you. Thank you, Jivara. Question from the other side.
At Center for Civilians in Conflict. So I have a twofold question. I think we all agree in this room that we all want to break the cycle of impunity as it was highlighted during that discussion. Now, what does it mean in concrete action? Could you maybe suggest a accountability roadmap with concrete action for people to understand what they can do? You mentioned, Dr. Elias, advocacy. So how can we use this advocacy effort to move actions towards accountability? The second part of the question, how do we move from post-facto accountability to real-time civilian accountability? We very often, when we speak of accountability in conflict, we wait for tens of thousands of civilians to be killed to speak of accountability. So how do we compel accountability in real time as conflicts are unfolding? Thank you.
سنختم بسؤال أخير.
We conclude with the last question. Can I speak in English?
My name is Dr. Anas. I am a professor in constitutional law. So it's a very brief question actually. What the aim, what the purpose of a creation, the ICC, and where the immunity of the judges after what we say, all these brochures coming on, you know, all these judges, like example for you, and you have all this legacy coming from Uganda, and you were Minister of I think Ministry of Justice, right? So what the purpose of creation ICC, like a criminal of Netanyahu, he can impose his willing, anyone can make or interfere in your decision. Thank you so much.
شكرا جزيلا. يعني أسئلة كثيرة في الواقع.
Thank you. Many questions we'll try to answer. If there is time, we'll come back to the floor for further questions. But we start off with Ms. Bensouda. Questions about the effectiveness and the credibility, and if civilians can be protected in any way. Is this universe wide enough for us without anybody violating our rights? And So that there will be actually no accountability. Can we live without our rights being violated? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think I'll also start with the initial several questions that have been posed regarding the situation in The Hague before the genocide. I am not able to answer what happened to all those documents because, as you know, my term ended before what is happening in Palestine now. My term ended in 2021. What I was able to do at the time when I was there, when we had to open the Palestine situation, I think I did. As I said, I did, despite the threats I received that if you open this case, you will be sanctioned, you will do this, you will be called whatever names. But I decided to open it because I think that was the right thing to do. That was the just thing to do, and that is what I did. But what happened to the documents after I left, I am not able to say now because, as you know, I'm no longer there. I think you also asked about the Trump peace plan as an alternative to the ICC. Is that what you meant? I do not think that this can be an alternative to the ICC. As you know, the ICC is the first international permanent criminal court that deals with individual criminal responsibility. This is something that we have to remember. It gets mixed up a lot with the ICJ because people talk about the ICJ, which is not the ICC. ICC, as you know, and I think part of that will also answer, Professor, your question, the fact that the international community got together and said that we have to create a permanent court. And you will remember that before then, you had the ad hoc tribunals, you had the ICTY, you had the ICTR, the Special Court of Sierra Leone, and several other courts. Initially, we all started with the Nuremberg courts. But you had the ICC being the first international criminal court that tries individual criminal responsibility. What Mr. Trump is proposing is not that. I don't think that anybody is being proposed for individual criminal responsibility. So I do not think that this can replace the ICC in any way. So I don't think that can be done. And you also talked about protection. As far as the ICC is concerned, of course, again, it is the first permanent court that talks about witness and victim protection. But all that had to come within the cases that the ICC is dealing with. So I will not exclude the case of Palestine, of course, because ICC is dealing with the case of Palestine. And of course, arrest warrants have now been issued against individuals in that situation. So there is a mechanism before the ICC in which victims and witnesses are protected. But most of the time is when, or in fact, in all time, is when these individuals are directly dealing with a case that is before the ICC. It is not like a protection, a wide protection that covers everybody in every place, because you will understand again that the ICC neither has the means nor the capacity to be able to do that. So these kind of protections, of course, falls again within the mandate of the United Nations. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be clear about that. But the ICC does have protection mechanisms in place and has the power to be able to protect when a case is opened. And some people have been contacted to further the case. I think this is also clear. I think your last, next time, concrete action. I think your question about ICC and what is the purpose. First of all, we have to remember that it was nations that came together. That said that really we have to have an institution in place which will be able to act quickly, which is nimble, and which will deal with these crimes, these very serious crimes that we do agree that they shock the conscience of humanity. And that is war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and now the crime of aggression. These are crimes that really have to be dealt with at that stage. And this is why the ICC was established. And what happened was that initially, in fact, almost everybody at the United Nations signed the ICC treaty, but then the ratification became a problem. But I can also say that it is one of the Rome Statute establishing the ICC was one of the fastest ratified statutes that you have currently. You can check that, because within 4 years, the ICC was established with the required number of ratifications that was needed. So this has to be realized. So this just demonstrates the need that we had for justice, the need that we had for accountability, which we still have. But what has been happening over the years is you have moments in which this attack on international justice, on multilateralism, it becomes very acute. It is one of those moments that we are facing today. And it doesn't mean that we have to throw our hands in the air and give up. We must continue. This is what is international justice, I always say, is not a sprint, it is a marathon. We have to keep at it. We have to continue despite all odds. I mean, if we give up, you throw in the towel, then those who look up to the court for justice will never have it. And then the world, imagine that today we have an institution like the ICC and the world is like this. Imagine without ICC.
شكرا.
Thank you. I was afraid from the outset that we would fall in this trap, that we will not benefit from this or that, but we went from Mr. Saeed. Even us journalists, we ask, is what we are doing beneficial? The bloods that have been spilled. 10 journalists of Al Jazeera were martyred before our own eyes. They were live with us and they were martyred and have fallen. So the price that was paid, some lost their families, some lost their limbs, some lost their own lives. Are those prices worth it? What we provide on the screen and what people document with their phones and cameras, whether broadcast in Al Jazeera or privately, is that really an evidence in the courts that could make those people convicted one day? Tell us, Mr. Saeed, what can we do as individuals? Because the battle has not yet been lost, and as was said by Bensouda, this is a marathon. The documentation, whether by journalists or other individuals, has an influence on the criminal measures, and it is an evidence before the ICC and the national courts. So the answer is absolutely yes. Meaning, one of the crimes against Gallant and Netanyahu is inhumane acts. We have seen pictures of videos of children in Gaza where there are surgeries done to them without anesthesia. So according to the prosecutor of the ICC, those videos document a crime against humanity, which is doing inhumanitarian acts. For France, in the case of the international jurisprudence, we said for the first time there is a warrant for arrest regarding the contribution of in genocide, and this was shown also by some Israeli institutions who prevent humanitarian aid from going in. Yes, there is feasibility for that. Maybe you wouldn't see it today, but practically we will see that using those videos before those courts is feasible, and those videos could be used in other contexts even in 20 years. And this is linked to civil society role in Palestine and what they did. When those organizations started working on criminal responsibility and they started holding meetings with Kwambo and then Bensouda, Palestine did not sign the Rome Statute, so they couldn't tell the ICC, you should investigate in a certain country if they don't recognize the Rome Statute. And this technical measure is what paved the way so that there will be prosecutors looking into the Palestinian case and cause. Since 2000 till now, 2026, we have warrants for arrest. Had it not been for the work of the civil society organizations who documented and the journalists and all that, we wouldn't have reached the level that we have now, where there are international warrants for arrest against a prime minister and a defense minister. One of the questions raised about those warrants for arrest, is this a test of the credibility of the international system? If there is no application for those warrants for arrest, some said they will implement the decision of the ICC and they will stop the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister and arrest them. Some say there is an issue of impunity, but if you want to know if those warrants for arrest have an influence on you, look at the flight map and itinerary of that Prime Minister and the Defense Minister when they go from a country to another. If he passes through or goes to a country, then he could be stopped or arrested. The ICC, irrespective of the political nature which is linked to the international system, and the role of the UN Security Council when they refer a certain cause such as Libya or Darfur, the referral was done because there was no veto from any country. In the Palestinian cause, the veto was always used by America, and regarding Syria, the veto was from China and Russia. So this is linked to the international system, not the ability of the ICC to implement the law independently and pay the price for that. When the court has competence, there was no distinction or discrimination between Libyans and Syrians and Sudanese or Palestinians. The same court issued a warrant for arrest against Bashir and against the Prime Minister of Israel and against Vladimir Putin based on the same criterion and the same standard of evidence, which is the right application of the law. And Ms. Bensouda said this court did not have mechanisms to implement the law because they don't have mechanisms because they are linked to states. So if there is a blame, then it should be done to the states and not the court itself.
انتهى وقتنا لأن كان هنالك أسئلة كثيرة.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Ms. Bensouda needed to take more time maybe to respond. We apologize to Dr. Ilyas and Dr. Tariq. The nature of the questions forced us to conduct this round in this manner. We thank you. We thank our panelists. We thank our audience and our followers. And we will continue this forum tomorrow and the day after. We look forward to meeting you tomorrow and the day after. Thank you.